It is. Are you ready to start, Dr. Stewart?
I'm ready. Let's go.
Hi, good morning. My name is Dr. Liz Pignon, and I work for IDRA. I'm an education associate, and I'm so honored to have Dr. Mandy Stewart joining us today. She's going to be talking about translanguaging in the ESL and ELA classroom through Readers and Writers Workshop. Dr. Mandy Stewart is an associate professor at Texas Women's University in the Department of Literacy and Learning, where she is the program coordinator for the Certificate of Biliteracy and MA in Multilingual and Multicultural Studies. She is very passionate about the bilingual and second language development of adolescents who are acquiring English as an additional language, focusing on the intersection of critical literacy and language research. Through the Elevate grant from the U.S. Department of Education, she works with high school students to improve the academic outcomes of emergent bilingual students through a cross-disciplinary multilingual approach. Dr. Stewart is also the co-author of the Practitioner Focus, but does this work for English with English learners, a guide for ELA teachers 6 through 12, as well as the critical research book, Radicalizing Literacies and Languaging, a framework toward dismantling the mono-mainstream assumption. So without further ado, I'm so excited that Dr. Stewart is here to join us and lead our session today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pignon, and thank you all for coming. So just a little about me. I am really passionate about helping all teachers, whether you are bilingual, ESL, or mainstream teachers, to understand how we can support the biliteracy development through translanguaging for our emergent bilingual students, or if we call them English learners, and we'll talk about names. As Dr. Pignon mentioned, my research focus is often adolescents because I see there's a very large need for that in the research, but I work with teachers and other educators who are in early childhood, pre-K3, all the way through 12th grade and adults. So the presentation will span those areas today. Feel free to put anything you'd like in the chat. I'm not really good at multitasking while I'm presenting, but while you're in the breakout rooms, I'll certainly go and try and address all those questions. And you'll see that the Google Slides I'm using are linked in the chat, and we'll put those again if you don't see them. And that has my contact information. So I'm very happy to, be in touch with you after the presentation. But let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. If at some point we find the system slow this way, we're going to do another method. But from our test, this seemed to be working the best. So I'm going to focus on the ESL and ELA, English Language Arts classroom today. If you are a bilingual teacher and you teach in another language, like I see Valeria here, who teaches pre-K in Spanish, that's wonderful. She's one of my former students and an excellent educator. This is still for you, but I'm really focusing on helping people who are not teaching in other languages to know how they can do that, where it might not come as naturally. I do encourage all of you who are in bilingual or dual language education, attend my really good friend Ali Babinow's session this afternoon, where she focuses on the elementary dual language classroom. What I'm going to share comes from some of my work with a teacher named Holly Genova, and we've done some work together in her classroom, and it comes from this book. So a lot of what I present, the ideas are here in this book, and then as I've been working with other teachers, pre-K through 6, I've been implementing some of these ideas in their classrooms that I'll share. So first, a note on names. You might think, why is Mandy at this conference on translanguaging and has a book titled, English Learner? So if any of you, like me, have been around for a while, the label and labels are sometimes bad in and of themselves that we use for students who are in the dynamic process of acquiring English as an additional language in our schools has changed. Probably none of us use LEP anymore, which is good. We might still say English learner, English language learner. And when I work with secondary educators, my publisher in particular tells me, if you want to have influence with them, if you want them to listen to you, then you need to use a term they know, like English learner. So I'm very purposeful in the term I use to make the most difference. However, in general, I do prefer the term emergent bilingual, which you'll probably hear from most of your presenters here at the conference. And some states, such as the state of Texas, is now adopting this in official legislation, although we know it will take a long time for that to trickle down to the classroom. Sometimes we hear terms such as bilingual students and multilingual students. I love those terms, but I also realize those might imply a larger group of students, such as heritage speakers or students who are not actively acquiring English. So emergent bilingual seems what's best to me in general to note these students, like the young man you see here, who was a 4th grade student from Ghana in one of my graduate students' class, and there he is reading a culturally relevant book that she found to connect to his language and culture. So we are going to build on the experiences of David here and what he tells us about why he liked the book and why he got more into reading in his home language, French. But just know, whenever you're thinking about what name do I use for these students, whether you're in a district professional development or a conference or just talking to someone, consider, are you taking a deficit or asset perspective, but at the same time, know your audience and be strategic. I certainly hope to bring the secondary ELA teachers along to the term emergent bilingual. My publisher even said, Mandy, if you can get a second edition, we'll put emergent bilingual on the cover, but not yet, because we want to influence people to bring them along. So be strategic. As we get started, I'm going to put us in breakout rooms because even though I'm going to dedicate most of this session to Readers and Writers Workshop, I want us to really take note that reading and writing should be born out of oral language. That's not the focus of this presentation, but I want you to know that is a great value I have and where our Readers and Writers Workshop should be grounded in. So as you go into breakout rooms, I'm going to have you use an oral language activity that Holly Genova, my co-author, and I have used with students who are newcomers. So it is, where are you from? So in a newcomer class, everyone's from a different country, so that's really interesting. Some of you might be from a different country, and you can use that. But if you are from a small town in East Texas like me, Mineola, for example, know that I value where you were from as well. So instead of using a country, you might use a state or a particular region. But the idea, and this is exactly what we use with students, is that you will introduce yourself giving clues, knowing that our emergent bilinguals might need these sentence stems that I have at the bottom. So if I'm an emergent bilingual in this class, I would say, hi, my name is Mandy. The place where I am from has a lot of cows. I'm from the country. In this, instead of country, I would say city. We like to ride Amtrak, and it is close to Tyler. We speak English where I'm from. That might not give you enough information, but people can make a couple of guesses in your session, and then you could just tell them, you know, I am from Mineola or wherever you're from. So the idea is for you to be able to very briefly introduce yourselves, but using a way that you could with your emergent bilinguals that will develop community. So I'm going to start the breakout rooms now. I hope that there will be at least one other person in your breakout room. Oh, actually for breakout rooms, I forgot, y'all can choose. This is how I would like for you to choose your breakout rooms. And if it doesn't work out well, Liz and I are going to move you around. So if you are focused either as a teacher or a specialist, a principal on pre-K through first grade, you go to room 1. Very simple. If you're second grade, 2, third grade, 3, so on. If you are focused on 10th, 11th, 12th grade and adults, go to room 10. And if Liz and I see that there is not someone to have a partner in one breakout room, we'll move you around really quickly so you're not by yourself. But the goal is that you'll go to the same breakout room every time during the session, so you'll be working with the same people. So again, K through 1, go to 1, second 2, etc. 10th, 11th, 12th adult, go to 10. And I have started them. I hope that it's working. Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I recognize that you might not have had enough time to really share. And just for the sake of time, I just wanted you to get a taste of an oral language activity you might do with your emergent bilinguals. Of course, modifying for different ages, different levels of English proficiency, or if you have a common home language there, such as Spanish or Vietnamese, where students could, of course, translanguage, speak in both of their languages, or use their home language if that's what they're most comfortable in. I think the goal is to develop community, because that is the foundation of Readers and Writers Workshop. With that link there where it says, where are you from? That will show you other oral language and community building activities you can use with your emergent bilinguals that Holly, Genova, and I have used in the secondary classroom with newcomers. But of course, you can modify as you need to. So now that we've established that community is so important, speaking is so important, I'm going to get into the meat of this, which is Readers Workshop. So why is Readers Workshop so important for our emergent bilinguals? Well, reading is important for anyone. You might know from a research that there has been a very well-documented Harry Potter effect, meaning that kids in that generation, people a little younger than me who were adolescents at the time the Harry Potter series came out and were so into those books, there's research that documents how their reading test scores were statistically better. Those kids who were reading Harry Potter and those that weren't. And even for myself, I read the whole series beginning to the end while I was studying for the GRE to get in my doctoral program. So of course I had my list of words I was working on for the GRE, and I was seeing those words in context in the Harry Potter books. So we know reading will help us with vocabulary acquisition, which is so important for our emergent bilinguals. Maybe some of you who have studied reading a lot have learned about the Matthew effect. So this is well documented as well. And the Matthew effect comes from a verse in the Bible that basically says, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So we know starting in early childhood, the kids who are reading and they're into reading and they're reading more and more, they keep getting better and better and better, doing better on the test scores that even if we don't care about as much, we know it's important for our schools, for our administrators. And then the kids who struggle with reading early on or are disinterested because nothing suits them and they don't like it, we know that that gap just continues to widen. The rich get richer and the poor get poorer. So we want to get our emergent bilinguals on the rich track with reading. And I think translanguaging gives us a great hook to do that, because we are not in the English only straitjacket with translanguaging. We can provide reading like you saw that David had at the beginning of the show, at the beginning of the slideshow, that is relevant to them, connects to their experiences, their cultures, and connects to their languages. Even if you say, well, Mandy, what if it's pre-K and they're not reading yet? I need to have books in their languages? Yes, because if it's the language that their papa or their mama or their grandmother or older siblings speak, that's the language we want them reading in. So we want to put our emergent bilinguals on the rich get richer track. And I see there's quite a lot of you in our secondary breakout rooms. It's good information for me as I go through this presentation, but know that all is not lost. You might be thinking, I don't get them until 8th grade, until 11th grade, until they're 20 years old, and they're going to get, kicked out of the school system at 21. It's okay. All is not lost, and there are still things you can do for your older students. And then next, why reading? If you're in this session, you've probably read the work of linguist Stephen Krashen before, and he's done a lot of work with the power of reading related to second language acquisition. So I think that is the sweet spot when we can really get our students interested in something in English that is at their English proficiency level and they can relate to. That can really help them with second language acquisition. So as we look at Reader's Workshop, we're thinking with a translanguaging lens, home language reading, and that could be in multiple languages, as well as English reading, regardless of what we teach. Even if we're in a mainstream or ESL classroom, we're doing that. So you'll see pictures throughout, or some of the students I've been privileged to work with the past few years. But just some elements of the Reader's Workshop model to know that there is a lot of choice for students, a lot of self-selection in text. So that's why we're going to spend so long today talking about how to find all these texts that students can choose from. There's time for independent reading, y'all. And when I get to go to schools, when we're not in the pandemic, I think the best thing I can see is a class full of all the students with their independent reading book and the teacher sitting at their desk with their independent reading book, and everyone is reading. I know sometimes teachers feel like they're not teaching, and what if an administrator comes by and they're not teaching? But we know from research that could be the best use of the class time, to take that 10 minutes or so at the beginning of a class, even if it's once a week, maybe every day if you can, and give students independent reading time while you are reading as well. I was in a high school ELA class with a lot of emergent bilinguals right before the pandemic. And that high school had implemented a every classroom, every day independent reading policy around the school. This class had a lot of newcomers in it, and the newcomers spoke Spanish and French. Their teacher, his name is Seth Ross, he's amazing. He made sure, working with their librarian, they had high interest adolescent and young adult novels in Spanish and French. All of the newcomers had chosen books in their language, and it was a crowded classroom. You know, it's high school, y'all. I expected there to be a little ruckus in there, but when it was independent reading time, you could have heard a pin drop, because those students, those newcomer emergent bilinguals, were so engaged in what they're reading. I was the deviant one that didn't have a book with me, so I had to get something off of Mr. Ross's shelf so I could do my independent reading for a full 10 minutes. And those kids didn't want to stop. And I think, what if Mr. Ross would have thought, I'm an ELA teacher, an English language arts teacher. I need to have books in English for my emergent bilinguals, and was really pushing English, English, English. Would I have been able to hear a pin drop in that room? Would those kids have been as engaged? Probably not, because they had access, language access to these high interest YA novels in their language. So just keep that in mind. Reader's Workshop will have mini lessons, because we're not just doing independent reading the whole time. You are teaching. You're very purposeful in what you're teaching, though, in a mini lesson. And we don't have to be just all lackadaisical, willy-nilly, hey, y'all read just whatever you want, whenever you want. Within our Reader's Workshop, we as the teacher are going to establish some genres we want them to look at, some guidelines. So while there is a lot of self-selection and choice, it can be within our curated text set that we will look at later on. And the most important, y'all, is that in Reader's Workshop, there is a large quantity of reading, like probably way more reading than we're used to having available to our students if we're using a curriculum. So I think with Reader's Workshop, you can curate your own curriculum for your individual students, which will really support their biliteracy, their home language literacy, but also their second language acquisition in English. But especially y'all secondary people, when you go to conferences, literacy conferences, reading conferences, and PD, you hear people talk about Reader's Workshop. And I agree with what they say. People like The Book Whisperer, Donalyn Miller, great books to read. Penny Kittle, Kylene Beers, looking at the high school level. These are great people to read. But just keep in mind, here are some assumptions of Reader's Workshop if we're not taking a translanguaging approach. So a lot of what they tell us, they assume that students are only reading in their first language. That language is in English. The students are orally fluent in English and the students are monolingual. So if Mr. Ross would have taken that approach to his classroom, then all of his newcomer emergent bilinguals would have had to read in English. I think that would have been total chaos in his class instead of every single student engaged in their reading, because our students are like the ones that you see here. And these are actual students I got to work with. I love how the one at the end is being honest. They're talking about who they need to go to see at a school. And she's learning about what she needs to do when she skips class and goes to McDonald's. So secondary kids keep it real. And I like that. But our students are not monolingual. So we have to take everything we learn at these readers, writers workshop, professional developments that our school district might provide and take a translanguaging lens of what they're telling us, because our students are emergent bilinguals. We cannot put on that monolingual English straitjacket. So as we implement readers workshop with them, this is the information we need. First, on the left, you've got to understand Reader's Workshop. And there is, a lot of information about that from many different people. I have quite a bit in chapter 2 of my book with Holly Genova. But then we also need to add these elements that maybe our colleagues who aren't teaching emergent bilinguals don't need. So we need to understand second language acquisition and how it relates to reading. And then we need to know students' reading abilities in all their languages. So these could be languages you do not speak and languages you do not teach in. So I'm going to show you some tricks of how you can find that today. So as we get started, I want all of you to be actively involved with me, especially since I can't see you and I don't know that you're not sleeping. So go ahead and take a piece of paper with me. I have mine here. You may use notebook paper if you've got a spiral and you're taking notes in. Just, rip out a piece of notebook paper. If you have a printer next to you like me, grab a piece of white printer paper. You just need a piece of paper. And I want you to be actively involved in this session because it's long, y'all. I don't want you to fall asleep on me. And this is something that when I work with students, I call it a comprehension quadrant to help them make sense of things. When I'm working with teachers, I call it an accountability quadrant because I know y'all are inundated with professional development, with information. So I don't expect you to take away everything that I say in this presentation, but I want you to take away just a few things that you self-select that are the most relevant to you. So when you get your students again in August, you have something to put into practice to hold you accountable because it's summer. A lot's going to happen between now and August. So if you just have, your accountability quadrant with a few things, that will help you. So as you take your paper, fold it in half for me, and I'll make sure I'm with the camera. And then once you fold it in half one more time. So basically you made quadrants. Now, this is where I wish I was with you in person, but this is how I explain it. You want to hold your paper in front of you like it is a book with the spine, the closed part on the left side. Now, when working with students, I'm very particular to not say, hold the book the correct way. I know we talk about that a lot in early childhood, but remember, some of our emergent bilinguals speak Arabic and other languages where the spine is on the other side. So I always like to point that out, and I never tell them to hold the book the correct way. Say, this is how you hold the book if you're using an alphabet that goes left to right, such as English, such as Spanish, etc. But be very mindful that for some of your students, the book goes in the other direction, and that we need to celebrate that. So please try and get away with telling them to hold the book the correct way. All of our early childhood educators here. But I do want you to hold the book as if you're reading a book in Spanish, for example, with the spine on the left. Take your finger, find the top left-hand corner. With emergent bilinguals, it might be good to have them or talk with a partner about this in their first language or have the instructions written. And then fold it down, make a little triangle. If any of you are also math educators, math people can have a heyday with all the math they can teach with this. After you have folded it down, so you've made the little triangle, give it some love, open it up, and it should look something like this where you have a diamond in the middle and 4 quadrants. Now, if I were with you, I would give you fun things to write with. Like I have a cool purple Sharpie here, but take whatever you have. Your students, though, will appreciate cool writing utensils. And I want you to outline the diamond. And then you can also make the 4 different quadrants. You may do it on the front and the back. Let me get this in. This is what mine looks like. Once you have that, we're just going to do the first part, and this is going to be our note-taking for us, and it's also an example of what we can do with our students to keep them engaged. So inside the diamond on the front side, I want you to put M3 reading. I know at this point you're like, Mandy, what is M3 reading? You can look at the top of the slide. It is reading that is multilingual. And that's going to be our big focus in this session. Multicultural and multimodal. So we're using different sources of text, not just books. So M3 reading for our readers workshop. Multilingual, multicultural, multimodal. And then you have 4 different quadrants here. So in quadrant 1, and you can choose, either one for quadrant 1, it doesn't matter. I want you to put what your students' languages are. And maybe you don't know. It's okay because you can take notes there. I'm going to show you some ways to find out. What are your students' cultural backgrounds and interests? And if you don't know, put how can you learn more? And I'm going to give you some ways you can learn more for quadrant 1. So don't feel bad if you're like, I don't know what languages, I don't know what cultural backgrounds. It's okay. Just put how can you learn about it, and I'll show you. In quadrant 2, so choose another quadrant, put research support. I'm going to give you just a very brief snippet of some research support for your M3 reading. So when an administrator sees your students reading in languages other than English, you have some support for that. When they see you using, multimodal and multilingual, multicultural text in your class, so you can tell them why you're doing it for your students. In quadrant 3, put locating books. I'm going to show you my favorite places to find books in working with emergent bilinguals. And that's what I do all the time, y'all. I work with different teachers in different school districts, and they'll give me a list of students and languages, and hopefully I'll get to know the students and find out some things about them. Where do I go to find these books? Because I've had some very unique requests before. This one young man from Mexico I was working with said he wanted a graphic novel about World War II, but in Spanish. And I found it. So I'm going to show y'all some of my tricks for that. And then in quadrant 4, because I know y'all are educators and we ain't got no money sometimes, I'm going to show you how to find some free online reading for your students that is also multimodal. So that's where you will take notes on that one. If you're someone who needs to write the whole time, feel free to turn your quadrant over to the flip side and start putting those titles, but we will have a separate time for that in the session. We're just going to focus on the part on the left right now with M3 reading. But if you need to be writing the whole time, hey, take care of yourself. You can go ahead and fill out the last part. Okay, so as we look at that first quadrant, you need to know your students' languages and their cultures. So first, if I think you have books available in all of these languages, you're going to be able to know if the students are gravitating from them or not. If you don't have any books in Burmese, how are you going to know if your students can read in Burmese? I was working with a group of students who were all refugees from Myanmar, which is also called Burma, referred to as Burma. And I had many books in Burmese, some children's books, some bilingual Burmese English books. Some kids went to them. They wanted to take them home. One young woman, even though she was pretty advanced in her English language acquisition, never did. So as I was talking to her, I was able to confirm she did not know how to read in that language. She wanted to learn. So that was my clue. technology, and maybe this is more applicable in the upper grades, but if your students are using a translator all the time, they're probably pretty literate in their languages. I was working in a middle school class, and a boy from China had this on his phone, this app where he could put in Mandarin character and then see the English word. He was using it all the time. So I'm like, okay, I bet he writes pretty well in Mandarin and reads pretty well. And sure enough, I found a young adult book for him in Mandarin Chinese, and he loved it. So notice that. Encourage them to use translation devices purposefully. Let's not just Google Translate all the time, but at certain times you can encourage it, and then notice. Now, this is what I encourage all of you to do. This link I have clicked where I have language resources available for you for free, a reading inventory, and then a language inventory. And these are translated into English, Spanish, and Korean. They're more for students who are middle school and up, but you can take them and you can modify them for your students. I had one pre-K teacher modify them for her pre-K students' parents, but this will give you some good information about them. So the English and Korean is first, followed by the Spanish. It will give you information about the students' language proficiency in their home language or languages, and then also their reading interest. They're there for you for free to use, but modify them however you want, particularly if you're in the lower grades. Then it would be more for parents. But y'all, the home language survey that is supposed to give us information, that is like the minimal of what we should get about our students' languages. And even if you're not in a bilingual program and getting official assessments in their home language, this will give you so much information. So I cannot emphasize enough how important that is to start. So I would put that down in your quadrant 1, that you're going to start the school year off with some type of survey, either the one I have for you, or modifying it, hopefully getting it translated in the languages you need, which I know is difficult, y'all. I hope to have the ones I have translated into Mandarin Chinese as well as Arabic really soon. And of course, I'll put those available on my website, but modify it as you need to learn as much as you can about your students. So let's get to the research part. So if you're at this conference, I'm assuming you already know a little bit about second language acquisition research. So let's just take the idea from Stephen Krashen of comprehensible input. So as we're teaching our students in the second language, so that's English, then you'll need to make sure that that input you give them is at their individual, that eye level, +1. So go just a notch above it. I constantly work with the teachers in schools and remind them that if our state mandated curriculum, or what the district tells us to teach, is I +100, well, then we're teaching the curriculum and not the student. And that student is probably an emergent bilingual who's going to be very disengaged in the back of the classroom and just not involved at all. So teach the student. Know your students' language abilities, their proficiencies in all their languages, and teach the student and make the case for that more so than the curriculum. And I really encourage you to curate your own curriculum through Reader's Workshop. What we teach will be comprehensible to them, especially if we're doing it in a theme, because we'll recycle that vocabulary in our Reader's Workshop and then also in our Writer's Workshop. So we might use books with limited text, so it's not too much. Of course, visuals, y'all know that, graphics, annotations, and I've worked with a teacher to annotate even a young adult novel and working with emergent bilingual newcomers. And you'll see some of that at the end of our book, but does this work with English learners? And then you're already learning about translanguaging at this conference, but purposeful translanguaging. As you're reading, stop, talk to your partner about what you understood. If your partner speaks your language, talk in your language. You can tell students to do that even if you don't speak their language. And that has been so key for me in working with students who speak languages I don't speak. I speak Spanish and French, but there is always a slew of other languages in any classroom that I don't speak at all, besides learning a few phrases. So to tell them, talk in Chinese about what you're reading, share that. And I don't worry about them being off task. It's more important to me that they have the opportunity to speak in their language. So Readers Workshop is really great in providing comprehensible input at that I, individual, +1 level, because we have so much choice there. Real quick to address Natalie's question. So inventories for parents that can't read, and this could be for older students who cannot read at their level as well. That's excellent. And yes, I would still develop it and do an oral interview. Hopefully you can find someone who can speak their language. If not, I would do the best you can with you putting forth effort. And I think even if you get the tiniest bit of information, that is relevant and that's important. You don't have to know everything to start somewhere. So that's a great idea, Natalie. And if you're working with a parent who speaks a language that you don't speak and there's no one else there that speaks it and they do not know how to read in their language, every bit of effort you put forth with that parent will pay off. So not perfect, but I think there's still so much you can work with there. And I always like to remind myself that just because a parent or a student, even an older student that's maybe 15, does not know how to read or write in their language, they are still literate because they have oral language. And I think of the richness of their oral language. So I'm like the illiterate police going around. Don't call that student illiterate. Don't say that about the parents, because their oral language is such a great wealth of information to draw from, and we can value that. But yeah, an oral language interview could work really well. Thanks for pointing that out, Natalie. Now, also to go in your research category, we are talking about comprehensible input at the I, individual, +1 level, not +100. Their individual level of English proficiency, +1, bumping it up 1 notch. But now I want us to think about how this might relate to their home language as we look at translanguaging. So a lot of you who have been around for a while or studied second language acquisition, probably like me, you admire the work of Jim Cummins. I particularly like his work as it relates to reading. One of his lesser known ideas is the one that really resonates with me as a literacy educator, and that's the threshold hypothesis. So to explain this, let's imagine that because of political unrest in my country, I am forced to flee to protect myself and my family. And now I'm in Nepal. Might not have been because I've chosen to or I wanted to, but that is where I am. Like a lot of our students who are refugees or economic refugees in some way. So I'm in Nepal that, as you can see on the screen, has a completely different language system. If anyone here speaks Nepali, please put it in the chat. I would love for you to read this to us. I've yet to be in a session where anyone is, but I would love that. But let's say this is the text I'm handed in my classroom, in my Nepali as a second language classroom. I'm there, and this is what the teacher gives me. It has a nice visual with it. I like the visual. That's what we're supposed to do as ESL teachers, so that's good. But I'm looking at this, and I can't make any sense out of it. And even though I am a good reader in my language, when we were talking about the Matthew effect, the rich get rich and the poor get poorer, I was one of those kids, like maybe some of you, the rich got richer. I kept reading and I had books in my language that I was interested in, and I kept reading and getting better at reading. So even though I am a really good reader and have great literacy skills developed in my language, I haven't reached the threshold yet of Nepali language acquisition for those skills to make a difference here. I might not even know, do I go right to left, left to right? I have no idea. So until we can get our students to the threshold of second language acquisition proficiency, so English proficiency, their skills they've developed in their home language can't kick in yet. But we know that they're not going to show up in class and in one day or 1 year, boom, English language proficiency. even though many of our administrators or states in some cases might want us to get them to English language proficiency like that, we know that's not how it works, and research supports that. We know it's going to take time. So if you get a student, whether this is an adult or a pre-K student who's coming to you as a beginner in English, it's going to take a while to get them to more English proficiency. Don't waste time then for them to be able to be a reader to get to that oral language proficiency. That's when you can start developing those literacy skills in the home language by giving them young adult books in their home language, like Mr. Ross did in the high school, by providing books and languages their parents speak in the early childhood. Or I'll show you reading that can be read to you that they can use on their own or with parents who might not be able to read in their home language as well. So as we get students to this threshold of English language proficiency, let's take a translanguaging stance. Let's develop their general reading skills in their home language because, and this is what I love about Cummins' theory, that when we get them to the threshold of English language proficiency, all of the skills that they have developed in their home language, all of those reading skills are going to help them go even farther like that. So once I am able, if I were doing this, to be able to acquire some basic Nepali language proficiency, when I get to that level, all of my reading superpowers I've developed in my home language will kick in, and wow, now I am on fire to do well in reading in all of my languages. But we need to remember, we need to get them to that threshold of English language proficiency at the same time, developing their reading skills in general, taking that translanguaging approach, knowing that it's going to help us in the long run. So that shows research support for your administrators that say, nope, that they need to be reading in English. You want them to be able to take off when you get them to that English language proficiency threshold. So keep developing their home language literacy. So as we think about Reader's Workshop for emergent bilinguals, we need to remember these key factors, giving them support in different ways, giving them choice in what they read, and sometimes even in the language they read in. And then another key element of Reader's Workshop is conferencing, which I think works great with emergent bilinguals. I know many teachers have limited time, but if you can figure out a way to meet one-on-one or in small groups with all of your students at some point, I think that can really help your Reader's Workshop grow. So what do you do for your Reader's Workshop? I suggest you have all of these books in your classroom. And you can see I have a shelf behind me that has at least half of these books. I have other kinds of books like this in another office, but this is going to be your checklist. So y'all keep this slide somewhere handy, because when you go in breakout rooms later, you're going to try and find as many of these as you can. So picture books, and not only for early childhood, I use picture books with high school and adult. We would just use them in a more mature way. Wordless books are amazing to use with language learners. ABC books, and I'll show you an example of how to use ABC books because there's so many out there from different countries, so many, y'all. And I've used them with high school students, not just pre-K. Of course, bilingual books, books in lotes. For your older students, some novels and novels in verse, which I think are key for second language acquisition because the text is limited. Some short stories, graphic novels, and there are so many graphic novels available now. Of course, narratives, biographies, fiction, nonfiction, poetry. That is great for emergent bilinguals because, oh yes, you can get a copy of this. Liz, would you be able to share the link again? For your emergent bilinguals, poetry could be a very mature topic, very deep, that a lot of our older students will be able to really discuss, but limited text. An engaging and accessible information text. So not your textbook, not your textbook at all. It doesn't count for this, but you will find some of the engaging and accessible information text that is out there that will be very specific for a particular age level and grade. And of course, the free stuff, all the digital. So I'm going to show you how you can find some of these. And here's just an example of, what your text set might look like. And these are some of my favorite picture books that I've gotten to read with emergent bilinguals. So y'all can go to the place on your accountability quadrant where you put locating books. Of course, there are so many different places to look for books, and honestly, Amazon is not that bad. But here are just some of my go-to places. When I have the information about my students' languages, I have information about their cultures and their interests, so I'm ready to put together some text sets. This is my favorite website of all. It's called Worlds of Words, and it's from the University of Arizona. So these researchers study children's literature and cultural authenticity, meaning every single book on their website is going to pass through a very strict test of cultural authenticity. And you can read about how they evaluate books on this website if you'd like to. So for me, that gives me a little more peace when I meet a student from Myanmar and I'm looking for books that would relate to their country or their culture. I don't want to be stereotypical, and I don't want to put something out there that might offend them. But you can't know every language. You can't know everything about every culture, but you can certainly learn. So when a book is on this website, I have a little more peace of mind knowing that it has gone through a very strict evaluation, and the people of this research center at the University of Arizona recommend it. So that helps me. But what I do when I've gotten that information about my students' languages and cultures, I go to this search button. Now you can just search general right here. And if I'm putting, you can see, I was doing a text set about rules here. So I was searching rules, as a fun way to talk about how we would have norms in the classroom. I see I'm frozen. I'm assuming y'all can still hear me. I'm going to keep going, assuming that you can. I like to go to this advanced search right here. Oh, thank you, Eladia. So if you go to the advanced search, you can go and you can put in a specific country or region. So like, for example, David, that first student, we needed some books that would connect to his country. Oh, there I am. So his teacher and I went here and we selected Ghana. From there, you can put in more information. I think that that's enough for me, at least. I can go in here and then click search books. So it'll go from descending order from most recent to less recent. You're going to get some books here that have something to do with that country. You can read about the book and see if it's something you would like. Then you could, of course, find it on Amazon. But there are so many different options. You could do Ghana. I've used it a lot, and I might just search by a general region. You could do like Asia in general, but you could be more specific. I've worked with a lot of students more recently who are from Nepal, hence my Nepali reference. So this is a good place to help me find some resources that might connect to their language or culture. Again, I don't know until I try, but this helps me get started. So I just go in and I click all of these. I read a little bit about it. I see if, is it a picture book? Is there limited text? Is it bilingual? In what languages? Is it a novel? I look at that, and that just gives me a starting point. But that is my go-to website, wowlit.org. Also, some of you might know this more popular website, We Need Diverse Books. That's a great place to search as well. And for those of you who work with secondary students or adults, then I would highly recommend this website, Saddleback. They have a lot of what they call high-low books. So high as far as like mature topics that aren't going to seem like baby books, but with very limited English that a beginner emergent bilingual acquiring English can access, because we want that comprehensible input at the I+1 level. So most of these resources are going to be good for the English part of our Translanguaging Readers Workshop, even though Worlds of Words does help me find some books in other languages as well. But this is mainly the English part. But I want us, because we're translanguaging for social justice, to give more of a focus right now on the home language part. So I hope that on your comprehension quadrant, you were able to make a list of some of the languages your students speak. And if you have no idea, then at least you know at the beginning of the school year where you might start. But we do need to focus on different kinds of books that our students could have that include languages other than English. So here are some examples, and I'm going to show you where I find those as well, and where you can get some free stuff, because I know money, money, money. Okay, so I think every teacher, ESL teacher, English language arts teacher, math teacher, and I have a great algebra teacher who does this with her students. So no one's off the hook. The high school football coach, everybody needs these texts in their classroom, not just the bilingual teacher. So I think you need to have texts that are in English with loat words or phrases. And that might be something when you look at the back part of your comprehension quadrant, that can be one of your titles there, because we're going to look for books later. So the next would be a bilingual text, a text that is 100% in another language, and then a translanguage text. So let me show you some examples of these. Texts that are in English with loat words or phrases. For the student who speaks that loat, that language other than English, this can be a great way to provide comprehensible input, because even though they're reading mainly in English, they're going to see something they're familiar with there that is going to make the text more comprehensible to them. So that when the English is like +1, then they're able to understand it in context more. Here are just some examples. The book Biblioburro, A True Story from Colombia, is a book written in English that has many words and phrases in Spanish. And it's great. I use this in a lot of classes because it's about reading, the importance of reading. So it's great for then a student who speaks Spanish to be the expert, to tell everyone else in the room what it's about. Or if you particularly have a student from Colombia and you're privileging someone from their culture, that student can be really proud. The Turtle of Oman is a great middle grades novel that has many words or phrases in Arabic. I read it with the book club, and there was one person there who spoke Arabic, and she became the star, explaining to us all the nuances of the words that were in her language. But you don't need to speak Arabic to read the book. I mean, here's another book of 3 years and 8 months that has many words or phrases in Mandarin Chinese. So there's tons of these. And a lot of the books that you will find about certain countries or that take place in certain countries on the WOW website are going to be examples of this. These are really easy to find, y'all. And just to show you how this makes a difference, I had these books used in a classroom, and I was showing students how we would put a word or phrase from another language in there, even if we're writing in English. And students from Myanmar, one particular student wrote this how-to essay using the mentor text of the books in English with a loat word as an example. So he wrote, in Burma, a lot of people use tanaka to make themselves beautiful. It costs a lot of money, so many people make it themselves. Tanaka is a paste made from the bark, roots, and wood of tanaka trees mixed with water. So he was able to learn how he could do this in his own writing. Next, make sure y'all have bilingual text, and there are so many bilingual text available, even beyond English and Spanish. Here are some that have a historical component that you could use early childhood for sure, but if you want to make it more mature, you could use these for sure in middle, high school, and with adults. One talking about Japanese internment camps, about the historical part of a Chinese neighborhood in California, and then about the Syrian refugee crisis. So these are some of my favorites, bilingual text. But have a critical eye with bilingual text. What I don't like about all of these is which language comes first. English, my language. Not only does it come first, it's written bigger than the other language. So I feel like by constantly using these books, I'm just privileging my language, my culture, when I'm so trying to elevate the students' language, the students' culture. So when you can, look for books like this in the I See the Sun series. And there are many different countries used in this series that is great for a kindergarten classroom all the way through high school, especially with emergent bilinguals. What I like about the I See the Sun series is the artwork is really cool. First of all, you can look at the artwork. It's about just a regular day in the life of someone from this country. But y'all look, here's the whole page that I didn't show you before. I See the Sun in Nepal. You can see how the language other than English is before English. And I really like to find books like this because I feel I can privilege the student, their language, and their culture, which is so important for our Readers Workshop. For bilingual poetry, you can find some books like this side by side. This is not necessarily a children's book, but works great with maybe grades 3 and up. Inside this book, you have over 20 different languages. You have an authentic poem in that language and a piece of artwork from someone in a country that speaks that language, and then it's all translated into English. So there are many different languages there. Beautiful book. You might find books like Somos como los nubes, or We Are Like the Clouds. So this is a great book with side-by-side bilingual poetry, and I like it because the Spanish is first. The Sonia Sotomayor poetry book is wonderful to use with students, and I think this one is unique because it's distinct in 2 different books. There's one in English and then a separate one in Spanish, so you can have those side by side. And thank you, Shuling, about the Bernstein Bears books that are in Mandarin and with English translation at the back. I think we can never underestimate how important it is that we do what we can to privilege the languages other than English and those cultures, and put the mainstream culture and language, which might be your language and culture like mine, put it in the back, like Shuling says. So you have those poetry books. But in light with our conference, I want us to think about translanguage text. So texts that are constantly weaving a language other than English and English together. So here's a great example. Drawn together with Vietnamese and English, and it's very authentic because it tells a story of a lot of our kids who feel more proficient in English. Maybe they're not emergent bilinguals, but they are multilingual students, and they have a parent or grandparent who is more proficient in the heritage language, maybe in this case, and being able to privilege bilingualism for this kind of student. We'll look for those in a minute, but since I showed you some different kinds of books to have that you will search for, I want to show you where you can find some freebies. So you can go to that place on your Comprehension Quadrant. I believe it's on the first part where it was locating texts that are free. Now, I cannot emphasize enough how important it is to have actual books in your classroom, like those I have on the shelf behind me, that have your students' language, that represent their culture, that represent their country. That is really important. We have an actual book, and I know you might have to beg your librarian or someone you work with for money for that, but that's so important. But to supplement that, so please note that I view all of this as a supplement. Here are some other ways to find reading in English that's comprehensible input, as well as home languages. So we're going to start with what I think is a great resource that they honestly don't want you to know about this, so they don't advertise it. I went and talked to the people of Wonderopolis and asked them why they weren't advertising their multilingual feature, and they said it's because they have to pay Google a certain amount of money every time someone uses it, but they're doing it. And it looks like Shuling has used Wonderopolis before too. So let me show you Wonderopolis first as far as the English part of our Readers Workshop. Okay, why do mice love cheese? I don't love that one. We'll find another. Oh, Flag Day was like, yesterday or a couple days ago. So let's say we want to do that. You can also search wonders like different science or history things. You can search anything and they will have something related to it. But we'll just go with what they had yesterday related to Flag Day. So here is some accessible informational text for students who are acquiring English. I love how you can hover over a word and get a definition. You can have it read to you. There's some pictures. You know, it's not too much. So very accessible for our students who are acquiring English. You can use these questions to start with, so to have some conversation. That's so important. But I think this is the most important part. Let's say you want this in a language other than English. Go to this Listen tab right here, and it will take you to something called Immersive Reader. Some of you have probably used Immersive Reader with other text or other apps before in your school. It's the same thing. Once you're in Immersive Reader, click the book, and it says Reading Preferences. So let's say I am working with some students from Saudi Arabia, like some middle school students I was working with who speak Arabic. I really want to encourage home language reading. Biliteracy development is important to me, and I need supports like this to help me because I don't speak Arabic. So once I've chosen my language, and there's tons of languages, I change this little button to By Document. Now I have the entire article with the same reading level, so not more text, here in Arabic for me. I can also have it read to me in Arabic. So this might be great for some of your students who, like this group of students I was working with, their Arabic reading proficiency was at different levels. Some of them could kind of make sense of this, but having the reading feature really helped them understand this. They can take it home, work with parents. They can go back and forth from the original to that language. And this is all free. Now, I know that a very good point to make is, but Mandy, it's Google Translate that's doing it. Yes, it is. Is it going to be perfect, the perfect translation? No. But I've had quite a few adults from other countries who speak, many different languages proficiency look at this for me, and their words to me are, Mandy, it's pretty good. So pretty good is better than nothing at all for me. I've, like I mentioned, recently used it in Arabic and Burmese to make content comprehensible to students and to encourage that L1 reading. So here's Wonderopolis, probably third grade and up, but I got y'all pre-K teachers there. I got you, Valeria. I got kindergarten teachers, and I have middle school and high school teachers who you're working with students who have not developed grade level proficiency in their home language reading, and they need to start at a different level. Or for people who need to work with parents to help parents develop their proficiency. Storybooks Canada. Thank you to the Canadian government and Prime Minister Trudeau for providing this for free, not only to people in their country, but to all of us. So you can choose language here, and you can see there are many different languages. I am going to set it on French because that's what I've been using it with recently. And here are some books. These books particular here are from the African Storybook. So for French-speaking students who are from nations in Africa, such as the Congo or the Ivory Coast and other ones, this might be relevant for them linguistically and culturally. Now, I'm going to click on this book right here, J'aime lire. So I love to read. I love the message too. So you can have it read to you. Here's the page. Here's the text. Very simple. You can have it read to you in English or French. So it's like having a very simple reader that we would use with our students who are just acquiring reading skills or acquiring language, and certainly in early childhood. But you can see very simple text that goes along with the pictures, and you can have it read to you. There are different stories. You can explore the website, and again, so many different languages, but it's going to be simple text every time. So I have worked with students before. For example, students from Myanmar, this one particular young woman from Uganda, who are adolescents and they're acquiring English, but they tell me, Miss, I can't read in my first language, but they want to. And I felt at a loss before on how to support them because I don't speak their languages. But websites like this that are free are very helpful in that. And for your parents too, who need to improve their home language literacy skills. So I know it looks like an obvious pre-K, K1 resource, but you can use this with your parents and through high school. Next, ESL Literacy Readers. I won't go into this too much. This is more the English part, but a lot of y'all maybe work with older students and you need some things to help them learn just different things about riding a bus in the US or getting a job, like very practical things with limited text that will help them acquire English. So these are great for acquiring English, comprehensible input, but with real topics that some of your older students or parents need to learn about. Unite for Literacy is great. Again, early childhood resource. Unfortunately, they only have Spanish and English, but it is totally for free. And it could be great for your young learners or for students, the middle or high school level, who speak Spanish but have not developed those literacy skills in Spanish. So remember, you have a middle schooler. Let's see, a lot of you chose the 9th grade. So maybe you have a 9th grader who's an emergent bilingual and comes to you. And through all the work you've done learning about the student's language proficiency, you know they haven't developed what we would consider 9th grade reading skills in Spanish. You can use a website like this to support you, to help the student develop those reading skills. Oh, Natalie tells us it has many languages. Natalie, if you could put in the chat maybe how to access those other languages, because I only see Spanish and English, but maybe through another website you can get other languages as well. And of course, audio is great. But this would help you get that 9th grader to develop all those reading skills that when you get them to the threshold right here in English language proficiency, they're going to be developing their literacy skills in their home language. Wow, they will take off. So we're working on home language literacy at the same time supporting their English language proficiency. Love that website. Definitely, Natalie, if you have more information, share it in the chat. Story Online. I'm wondering if any of y'all have used this. I was at a conference on Friday sharing this, and one teacher was like, oh my goodness, end of the day, I can't speak anymore. I'm exhausted. This is my go-to resource. And it's great for lots of ways. But Story Online is going to be English. So this is our comprehensible input in English. But when you have a famous person to different degrees reading a children's book out loud, showing the text so emergent bilinguals can see the text, see the visual, and hear it read fluently, great. So I would share that resource, if nothing else, for students to use at home. But if you're one of those teachers, you get to 3 o'clock and you're like, ooh, today was a doozy. I need something. Story Online could be your go-to. And because you'll see different celebrities on it, I think some of your older students, like I see a lot of you in here teach 7th grade, they might at least be hooked into it for the coolness factor of the athlete or someone who's reading it. So these are all free. I love free. And then here's just a reminder and some more information of things I've gone over. So I'll be quiet for just a minute and let you take some notes on your accountability quadrant of where you can purchase books, like locate them, and then some freebies. Right now, I'm working with a school district to get a lot of books in Ukrainian for them. And my go-to place for languages that are not as common to me and I'm not really familiar with is East West Discovery Press, a small independent publisher. And you can talk directly to the person in charge. Her name is Icy Smith, and say, hey, Icy, I'm looking for some children's books that are in Ukrainian from kids we're going to have coming from there. So I think it's a great independent publisher. I don't work for them, but I love them for difficult languages to find. Lectorum has everything in Spanish. So So I see what Valeria likes. The zombies no comen vegetales. So you can find a lot in Spanish online. You can find everything in Spanish in Lectorum. So it's a great place, but specifically for Spanish. I think I spoke about all of these online ones, but just know these aren't necessarily free unless your school district has purchased it. But I've been working with the school district that does have Epic and Sora apps available for their students. So through those apps and online libraries, these students are able to access a lot of text in languages other than English. So it's really saved this teacher from having to spend so much of her budget buying particularly novels in Spanish. So I hope you add those to your accountability quadrant. And again, just put what is relevant for you. If you only take away Storybooks Canada, that could make a huge difference in your classroom, in your family engagement, in your students' lives. So choose what works for you. And thank you, Liz, for putting those links there. So if you haven't already, you're about to go to breakout rooms to do some work. I want you to go to the flip side of your accountability quadrant. And in that diamond, I'll make mine with you. You are going to write books to buy or locate. So you're really going to make yourself accountable to actually do something after this session. You're going to go find this book in a library. You don't have money, or find something online, or you will purchase this book. So that's what this is going to be about on this side. So in quadrant 1, pick one of your quadrants on the flip side, put LOTE book, languages other than English. So again, you have to go back to the very first thing we talked about. What are your students' languages? Find out as much as you can. And even know that your Spanish speakers could have languages other than Spanish. I've worked with some students from Guatemala recently who speak Spanish and cachiquero. Or some of them speak Spanish and Quechua, or Spanish and Mam. And that might not be relevant to the home language survey. They might not have put all of that. So you can find that out. But I want you to locate at least one LOTE book that you will locate or buy for next school year. Oh, thank you, Valeria. Oh, and I call her Valeria. It says Maria Silva, but I know her as Valeria, about the story world. So that's great. If you're either in Dallas ISD or maybe your school district has that, that could be a great resource. So add that to your resources for sure. In quadrant 2, put bilingual books, or if you can't find a bilingual book that has both languages there, maybe you can have side by side, especially English, Spanish. There's a lot of that available. But I want you to challenge yourself to go beyond Spanish today if you teach students who would speak languages other than Spanish. Then books in English with a LOTE word or phrase. So I showed y'all some examples of those, and those are pretty easy to find from that WOW website. And also from WOW, you might find books that would relate to a student's culture, a multicultural book. That would be in all English. And again, we don't want to only have that, but that is something you need to add for Reader's Workshop. So your homework that you're going to do right now, so I should call it breakout room work, will be in your breakout room. I would like for you to go to the same one you were in before, since you are divided more or less grade level. And if we see we are by yourself, Liz and I will move you to a similar grade level. And I want you to try and complete your accountability quadrant. So please, if you are able to, turn on your camera so you can interact with one another. And if you're obviously at a computer, I want you to be able to help each other search for things. Maybe one of you is on the WOW website, another one of you is on a different website, and you're saying, hey, can you help me find a book in Vietnamese, or a book that's a bilingual English Vietnamese, or so on. I want you to help each other in your breakout rooms. So I will open those. I am going to give you 15 full minutes in your breakout rooms, maybe a little more. I will visit them, and I would love if you visit them, you had a challenge for me, like, hey, we're looking for this type of text. Maybe that is relates to this language or this English proficiency level. Give me a challenge and see if I can help you out. So I will open the breakout rooms now. As a reminder, if you can, turn on your video and go to the same room you went to last time. Oh, we are here. Thank you, Juan. I appreciate that. I'm developing my digital literacy here. I hope that just gave you a taste of what is possible as you begin to develop this multilingual, multicultural, and multimodal reading for your students. Is it easy? No. It's not. I had fun in one of the breakout rooms. They gave me the challenge of Pashto. And wow, I love that. They have, it seems like a good number of students who are refugees from Afghanistan who speak Pashto. And first of all, just know that it makes a difference that you know where your students are from already. You know that they're refugees, so you know some of the life experiences they come, and you know their language. So just shout out to those teachers who already know that. It shows you really care about your emergent bilinguals. But that's a hard language to find. So we were able to see that Wonderopolis would translate there. Unfortunately, I was hoping Storybooks Canada would have something, and they don't yet. But what I pointed out to them, as they're now looking for some actual books to have in the classroom, because Wonderopolis is great, that's reading, but we want those students, Lienlo, yes, Lienlo is really good. We want those students to know that you really value their language and culture so much, you're willing to have an actual text, actual book in the classroom that represents them. I encourage them just to send an email or call East West Discovery Press. That's the publisher I used recently in getting books in Ukrainian. And if you just look on their website, you'll see there's not a tab for Ukrainian like there is for Albanian and Chinese and Cambodian and Vietnamese and these other languages. But they have them. So sometimes you might just have to reach out to them or, another publisher like Lienlo or someone else and see. But I think that can just get you started to maybe start the next school year with 2 more books in your classroom than you had before, and to have at least one more website that you'll use with your students and share with your parents as well. Even though you just spent 15 minutes doing that, I hope it will be something you continually go back to build your library for Readers Workshop. And then you have your accountability quadrant. So I hope a few things are written on there. Even if you forget everything in the session, when you go back to school in August, you have something to do. So now that you have a little more knowledge on how you will search for text, whether they are actual books or poetry or online reading, I want you to consider how you might put all these texts in a theme. This is common in early childhood. A lot of our early childhood teachers are already teaching in a theme, but we can all do this even as we go throughout the grade levels and into adult. That will help all of our students, all of our emergent bilinguals with English language acquisition while they're also translanguaging and working on their home language literacy skills. So here is a high school ESL and reading teacher that I've had the privilege of working with. Her name is Mary. Mary was teaching a very diverse high school reading class that had emergent bilinguals at very different levels, as well as students who she refers to as neurodiverse, who are receiving special education services. And she put together a text set about the topic of refugees with them. So here we are. I'm giving a presentation about it. And the focal text she used was the middle grades novel Refugee by Alan Gratz, which is incredible. And she had it available for students in English and Spanish and the audio that they could go along with the English. So for some of her students whose languages she wasn't able to get the book in or who needed support with the English, even if it was their first language, they could read the book and have the audio along with them. And she found that the audio was, oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. I will share my screen. There you go. That hopefully you can see now is Mary. But the audio she was able to find for free on Spotify. So, maybe use your resources if you're not able to purchase the audio every time, then, she was resourceful. But besides just having this focal novel, she had different visuals. So I'm holding up one of the visuals she had, which is a text. So a visual, a photograph, a picture is a text. And that's one of the texts we use, which is a resource you can get for free from the United Nations. You just go to their website and request resources. So she found a relevant theme for her students. Then she found different multilingual, multicultural, and multimodal text related to the theme. So in addition to this young adult novel, I used the World of Words website, and I searched refugee this time, and I found many picture books that were approved by the website that were about refugees from different countries. Through that website, I found the Stepping Stones book about the refugees from Syria that's in English and Arabic, and so many others that we were able to get to put in this text set. So Mary and I worked together to curate a text set, multilingual, multicultural, multimodal reading, M3 reading, all three, about the topic of refugee. And she used this for a 9-week period doing readers and writers workshop with her students. So we had the big three: multilingual, multicultural, multimodal text. So we used the resources I gave you to curate this text set. So this was her curriculum for the 9 weeks. Here's an example from a pre-K classroom. So we're looking from high school to pre-K. I was working with a teacher this past fall named Monica Hughes, who teaches a mainstream pre-K class, but has emergent bilinguals in there. So some of the students are in her pre-K class who are monolingual English speakers. So they're not labeled emergent bilinguals, where others are emergent bilinguals. So she had an interesting situation where there were, just a lot of different language proficiencies there regarding oral language. She put together an ABC project. Before she started this project, she took my language survey that y'all saw a link that is available for you that is more for older students, and she modified it to make it relevant for her parents, to learn about the different languages represented in her class, the students and the parents' experiences with those languages and cultures. And she learned so much. For example, one student who was not labeled an emergent bilingual, she found out that student had a sibling who was deaf, and the family was learning sign language. She found out that one student's family had come here before the student was even born from New Orleans during Hurricane Katrina, but had that cultural connection there. Then she made a list. She had 15 students, so she made a list of the different cultures and, when relevant, the different languages represented based on the parent survey. She and I got together and looked for ABC books about all these different languages and or cultures. We use Worlds of Words. That was our main place. And then, other websites, but we pretty much started with Worlds of Words, searching ABC books, and then the different cultures there. So you can see she found one about Mardi Gras for her student whose parent had come from New Orleans. Todos a celebrar a Hispanic Christmas and Traditions alphabet book for her students with Latino heritage. P is for Papadoms, a student whose parents were from India. The sign language book that when she learned about a student who had a sibling who was learning sign language. And this all started from a student who she had learned spoke Malayalam at home. And she found this ABCs of the Malayalese, which is the alphabet for Malayalam, because she developed a relationship with the student's mom through that survey she sent out. So when she learned more about the language Malayalam from the student's mother, she invited the mother up to come, and she already had an English-Spanish word wall. Now she added Malayalam to her word wall for the ABCs as well. So by just sending that initial survey, she established a very unique communication with the parent, had the parent in the classroom, and learned so much more. So this is just an example of some of the books that we had. There were 15 students, but we did find more than 15 books. We had some general books, like first bilingual ABC book about barnyard animals and things like that, because we wanted the students and the parent to have some choice. We didn't just want to say, well, your family is from Louisiana, you take the Mardi Gras book. We included it in what they had to choose from, but we wanted to give those 4-year-olds some choice. In Monica's ABC project that lasted for 6 weeks, the family all had their own book at home to read. She was reading different ABC books in class with them from different cultures and brought me in to be the special guest to do that as well. And the family's, writing project was to choose a letter and then to think something that represented their family. It could be something related to another language or culture or not. It was very open. But you can see she did have one family from Albania. So they did A is for Albanian. And the parent wrote, "My family goes to Albania every summer to visit our family." And then included pictures. And then by Arlinda. That's the student's name. And here's the book that family had to serve as a mentor text in their special book. And she let all the students keep these books. You can see another family chose G for game night. And this is wonderful when you're not looking at a class that has, all these distinct languages or different countries, perhaps. Game night is a great addition to their class ABC book. Here is P is for parota, a certain dish that one student's family wanted to include. And here's the student whose mom came up to make the trilingual word wall in Malayalam. She was so proud of her book. And then here's the page, the P page that she did with her mom. You can see that Monica took all of these pages and she put them in protectors, page protectors, and then put them inside of this binder. So the class had their own ABC book that they could go to where they were the authors. So these 4-year-olds all authored their own ABC book in this class and shared so much about their culture, which allowed Monica to be able to connect with their families in a new way, and then to build on the language for families that had a language other than English there. So there's just another example, from a pre-K classroom. So you could go high school to pre-K, everything in between. Here is an example that you might implement with different grade levels as well. But think about how to connect to your students' life and their stories. So this came about when I was working in a secondary ESL classroom for newcomers. And these are pictures from the state-approved curriculum for this class. Maybe some of you who teach in the same state will recognize the pictures. And what the teacher and I found out is that these students who needed to acquire English, and this class was focused on English language acquisition, were also learning new content at the time from this textbook because it was about things that didn't relate to them. These students were like, this has nothing to do with my life. I just need to learn English. So it wasn't connecting to them. So this is Holly Genova, the teacher who wrote the book with me. This is what got us started working together. We decided we would curate our own curriculum through a text set for a readers and writers workshop that we did for an entire semester. So we went back to what we knew about second language acquisition. So this is me putting on my researcher hat. And we've talked a little bit about the research from Jim Cummins and Stephen Krashen already. But I would like for you to take out your comprehension quadrant, and I would like for you to add research from someone a little newer on the scene. Her name is Lourdes Ortega. She's a Latina in the U.S., and what she writes about second language acquisition really resonates with me and my experiences in the classroom, particularly U.S. classrooms. So Dr. Ortega tells us, as we think about English language acquisition with our students in U.S. classrooms, here are these 5 components we've got to remember. First, attitude. Those of y'all who teach secondary, attitude is everything, right? What's their attitude toward the target language, which for us is English? If we want to help them increase their English language proficiency, which we all do, we need to create a sense of belonging in the classroom so they want to be there. And translanguaging can really help us create that sense of belonging. Readers and Writers Workshop can help us create that belonging. We've already talked about comprehensible input, and she says, yes, that is a key component for our classroom. She really stresses that oral language part that I started the presentation off with, that our students need negotiated interaction in the target language, which is English. So it's that speaking part where we maybe give them support through sentence stems, encourage them to translanguage and draw from their full linguistic repertoire. But there are moments in our classroom where we have that speaking. The next part is the pushed output, that we need to push our students gently to have reading and speaking output in the second language, which is English. But we don't want to push them off a cliff, right? Or if any of you have just been pushed into a swimming pool, we know that's not fun. So some gentle push with some structured writing in English and some structured speaking, maybe with sentence stems in English, along with their home language, to give a gentle push that will not push them off a cliff. And then last, if you are a secondary, particularly high school ELA teacher, you know attention to the language code, the grammatical structures is so important, but it takes time to learn. For people who are, home language speakers of English, especially for our emergent bilinguals. So again, I think sentence stems are great to teach a language code. Reading and getting into your reading are great ways to teach language code. But I just wanted to include as part of our research component in our accountability quadrant, Lourdes Arteaga, because a lot of what we've seen in SLA in the past, a lot of it is from white men. And I value what they've said. I value the work of Jim Cummins, Stephen Krashen, Stephen May, and others. But let's remember that representation matters. And that's why, we have a conference focused on translanguaging who has been put forth mainly by Ofelia Garcia. And there are other second language acquisition researchers like Lourdes Arteaga who are going to have different perspectives that might relate really well to our student population. Okay, so what did Holly and I do? We noticed the problem. So remember, here's the problem. Students don't like the ESL curriculum, even though it was coming from the state. It wasn't working. So Holly and I were giving out language surveys and reading interest surveys to learn all we could about her 40 students. She, had a lot of students that semester. So we used the resources I showed you, and we found 88 different books that represented the students' languages and cultures. And these books would have poetry, short stories, limited text, longer text. In addition to these 88 books that we decided to purchase, we found a lot of online material as well. I know some of you are saying, how did we get the money to buy these 88 books? We applied for a small grant and got it. So, that is a possibility. I also think you could work with your librarians to get some of these books. Some of them might already be there. And if you're in middle or high school, you might need to work with an elementary librarian in your district. But yes, we did have money to purchase these 88 books. I admit that. I'll go back. What we did is we created then a text set for every language and culture represented. So for a whole semester, this was the reading that students were doing. This was the writing they were doing. And in our book, you'll see the specific reading activities we had and then the specific writing activities that I'll share with you in just a little bit. We're not going to do this in breakout rooms. I don't think we will have time, but sometimes an exercise I like to do with teachers is to create a turbo text set with M3 reading, multilingual, multicultural, multimodal. So by turbo, I mean do it fast. So I group teachers together and I say, okay, you have 15 minutes to put together all the text you can find, multilingual, multicultural, multimodal, about a particular topic. So I had a group of teachers in a class with me, and they did that with topics related to social justice. And they actually published these text sets that they just did 15 minutes to get started. They, of course, went beyond that a lot to curate text sets about different social justice issues. And I'll show you here. Oh, whoops. It's actually in the book on, let's see, here are the topics they had. You can see colonialism, immigration, Latinos as change agents, redlining, racism, many different topics. And these were for classrooms that included emergent bilinguals for sure. Some classrooms with 100% emergent bilinguals. They put together their text set and then created the different reading they could do from that. So that is what some of my students did as a class project that we ended up publishing in this book. Here, when you see turbo text sets, I'll just show you, this is how it just started. You see the more polished, finished product in a book, but it looks like the computer's thinking too much. Hopefully you're able to click on this on your own. In fact, I'm just going to put it here in the chat for you. So you can see how groups of teachers work together to just start thinking about topics such as Black Lives Matter. What are some texts they can pull together specifically for their emergent bilinguals on that topic? So again, finished product is more here in this book if you're interested, and you can look at that Jamboard to see how some brainstorming went on, because you can create a turbo text set, something in a quick amount of time, if you have your resources together, and especially if you're working together in a group like a team of teachers. So maybe some of you want to go back to your schools this fall, and in one of your team planning sessions, think, okay, y'all, here are some different resources where we can find books, where we can find some online articles. Here's the languages of our students. Here's the cultures. Let's think of a theme that would hook them. And let's spend the next 30 minutes just finding as many text as we can, including visuals, video, everything, to put in your text set. And that can be your curriculum for a week, for a whole semester, which is what Holly and I ended up doing. The text sets you see here are for anywhere from 3 to 9 weeks. Here's an example of what I did, putting together a text set that was just for one class. I had the opportunity of working with some middle school emergent bilinguals through Zoom during the pandemic. And I was just going to have, at the end of the semester, just this one class with this particular group of students. I knew a little about the students already from their teacher. I knew they were all Latinx students with different levels of Spanish and English proficiency, and were from different countries. So we were going to learn about the suffrage movement from them. So you can see I dressed up in a costume that they could see me on Zoom to represent the women's suffrage movement, like as an attention getter more than anything. I found 2 picture books that I used to read to them, one in English and one in Spanish, knowing that this represented the languages of the students, but it still didn't really represent their cultures, because in reading these books, you would think, okay, Susan B. Anthony and other people in these books, white women, were the leaders of the suffrage movement. And I felt like me being dressed up as Susan B. Anthony just reified that white women did this. So I did a little digging using some of the websites I showed you, and I found that particularly in New Mexico and Arizona, there were groups of Latinas in the U.S. who did some great work with women's suffrage. And I found, excuse me, some articles about that. I used the News ELA. It was on the list I gave you of websites where I found some articles where I could change the lexile level so I could make it more readable in English. I could change the language to Spanish, where we learned about something more from their culture related to this. So this was my turbo text set, put it together quickly for just one classroom. But you can see there are many different options. We're not going to do this, but I would encourage you to go back to this slide and use it with your team of teachers and create a turbo text set with them of everything that you can find about one topic. Of course, social justice topics are the most near and dear to me, but you could choose anything. Particularly if you're in the younger grades and you don't have a lot of time for social studies and science in your curriculum because there's such a push on the testing and reading and math, this might be a great way to choose in a history or social studies topic or a science topic to create a text set where you're reading and writing, developing all those literacy skills across languages, but using a topic related to another content area. So this will be the last thing that I cover, but I hope now you at least understand that you need to develop lots of ideas for books you can have, different things you can read. You need to curate a text set. So then what are you going to do with them? So, excuse me. I think one of the common things we think to do with the book is to do a read aloud. And I just want to point out that read alouds are great for emergent bilinguals at any age level. Here I am reading an ABC book to Monica's pre-K class there. Cute little kids. They kept getting closer and closer to me as we got closer to the end of the alphabet. So that was fun. But then on the right side, you see me reading aloud a book. This is actually the Biblioburo book, a true story from Colombia, to a group of high school emergent bilinguals. And I look angry right there because I'm illustrating the word grumble. Someone in the book was grumbling, so I'm illustrating it. So you can read aloud at all levels. But make sure that your read alouds are interactive with your student. So you might have a certain time where you pause for journal writing in any language. This is where our translanguaging comes in. You might be reading a book out loud in English because that is the common language of all the languages in your classroom. But then journal writing, have them respond in their home language or have them talk with a partner in their home language. Look up keywords to translate. Of course, visuals, things like that we already do as ESL educators. But I want you to think about during your read alouds, is there a way that you can project the text or have a copy for all the students so they can see and hear the text at the same time? I think that is the sweet spot of second language acquisition. And then if you're reading a picture book with emergent bilinguals that are older, like I was in this example here on the right, maybe you can help it feel like it's not a baby book by talking about a mature topic or analyzing the art that's there. I think there's a lot of that we can do with our older students so they don't think we're reading a baby book to them. Shared reading, I consider shared reading as anything where they can hear and see it. So you might want to do something like break a few copyright laws if you have to and make copies of certain pages or like of a picture book for your students. If you feel like you can't do that, then maybe you can just type out the text and have that to them so they can see what you are reading as you go along. We've already talked about the importance of independent reading, and this is where having text available to them in their home language is so important. I was working with one school district, and we did a campaign after spring break called Book and Backpack Campaign. So all of the emergent bilinguals in their classes needed to have a book in their backpack every time they went home because we were really pushing independent reading. We know that students are more likely to read when they have that book with them. We weren't forcing it on them. We weren't making them do something to show it, but we wanted to make sure they could find a book in a language they wanted to read in, about a topic they wanted to read in, that was at the level they chose. So we worked with them to find a book they would like, and they would take that book that is for them. So they know that I'm there. They call me the crazy book lady. Sometimes they call me the book donkey too, after reading that Biblioburo book, because I would come in with bags of books all the time. But they knew that I had worked with their teacher to find some books that really gave them voice, that they were telling us this is what they wanted. And we tried to find a selection of those books for them. So they would put the book in their backpack every time they would go home and then hope they would read it every day I was there, particularly Mondays after the weekends, like, what did you read this weekend? Tell me. Not all of them did, but more and more students were reading at home. So yeah, Book in the Backpack campaign worked really well for us with independent reading. But also if you can give them time in class, that's great. If any of you are interested in it, I have it linked here for you. I have a position statement that I've worked with some teachers to create about silent reading in the ESL classroom, because these teachers knew that the administrators would think, they're not teaching. What are you doing? Why are they reading in a language other than English? It's ESL, right? So using research, these teachers and I created this position statement to show what they believed about the importance of silent reading and then how that related to second language acquisition. So you are welcome to this here. It's available for free for you, but I think you should modify it for your particular situation and create your position statement either for yourself or with your team, why you value silent reading. We have another thing here about Reader's Workshop in the ESL classroom. If you want to understand, just why it's important and just some key notes that I've already talked about, they are here. You're welcome to, print that off and use it with other teachers in your school. That is Reader's Workshop. So obviously we don't have another 2 hours to go through Writer's Workshop. I just want to make these slides available so you can go back and look at them and you can think, okay, I have all these texts for reading. How can we use them in Writer's Workshop? So here's just some ideas of what you will do with Writer's Workshop. Knowing that writing can look in many different ways. It's not always a 5-paragraph essay, y'all, especially for emergent bilinguals. Here are these students, their writing was an acrostic poem that's translanguaged about their country or their parents' country of Mexico. Same thing with Writer's Workshop. You need to know information about your students. I just want to point this out as far as research. A lot of us think that with writing, particularly secondary teachers, we are guilty of this. I am guilty of this. We want everything to be grammatically correct. We're looking for accuracy. But remember about what Stephen Krashen tells us about the monitor with second language acquisition. When it is being used too much, it's an overdrive, that's going to impede second language acquisition. And if you've acquired a second language, you probably know that when you're focused so hard on always having the correct grammar and saying things in the right way, it will impede your fluency. So even though attention to the language code from Lourdes Ortega, we know that's important, have times where your students can just write, focusing on fluency rather than accuracy. Reading, writing, and connection is so important that our Reader's Workshop flows into our Writer's Workshop. Here are some just practical ways you can do that. Y'all can click on these links later on. You can find so many poetry templates, y'all, for free. So I go to readwritethink.org. I like their templates, but you could just create them yourself. You can Google them. For example, a bio poem. Let's say you're reading about famous people who have created change, and you want your students to write a bio poem about them. So they can use this bio poem template that you'll see. Here, this is the one from readwritethink.org. I love these. It guides them. You get the grammar thing, you're looking at adjectives. So it's a great structure for emergent bilinguals. After your students do it about someone they've read about in your Reader's Workshop, they can do it about themselves then, or someone they know. Or maybe you read a book together, whole class, and you write a bio poem about that person, whole class, or a person from a novel. Then they choose something to read individually within the same theme, maybe change makers, and then they write one about that person. Name poems are great as well. Here's an example, and Holly and I discussed this in our book, of how you can take a poem, such as We Came to America. There's a picture book about this poem, or you can Google it for free. And you take a poem and you just blank out certain parts where students need to fill in the blank. So it seems like a very simple activity, right? You have a poem. In this instance, it's a picture book of a poem. You just blank out certain words or phrases. Perfect for early childhood. But here it's being used in a high school class, and this student was being able to express her feelings about her country in Venezuela. You can see with the picture she included and the conflict there. So it can be a very mature activity. Here's another example in country poems that, again, it seems very simple, great for early childhood, but it can be more mature with your older students. And here's a beginner English learner's country poem. Don't be afraid about multimodal composing. And here's an example here that you can use with your emergent bilinguals, so they can use phrases and labels. And there's another example. And of course, in line with our theme, make sure your students are writing in all their languages, not just English. So encourage that as much as possible. And there's a free template for you if you like this idea that one high school teacher used. I did this with a student from Jordan, so you can see hers in Arabic and English. And it was part of a larger project that she ended up displaying on the wall, where she was sharing her country and her language with other people at her school. As part of the Writer's Workshop model, try and take time to sit with students, like I'm sitting with one student right there, and talk about their writing and what is their next step to revise. Don't revise everything. That's overwhelming. But what's their next step? I think that's so important. We're not going to go to breakout rooms yet, but I just want to make sure that y'all have my information here to get other resources. And we have a few more minutes, so I'll just stay here. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and I'm here to share them with you. But if you look at my website, there's a lot of free resources there for you. Some free articles I have, and then of course all of these ideas are in my book with Holly Genova. But does this work with English learners?
Bravo, Dr. Stewart. We got so many resources. I love the research that I could always spit back to administrators and other teachers who might not be so sure. We got so much of a wealth of information today. Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, I see Shuling has a question. So that's a great question, Shuling. And actually, Esmeralda brought that up in a breakout room. There's not a hard and fast difference. In fact, what one person might say is one, another person would say is different. So a translanguage text, I think a really good example of a translanguage text is when there's a lot in a language other than English and a lot in English, or two other languages that don't even have to do with English, right? I keep privileging my language by default. But when there's a lot of both of the languages or three languages and it's going in and out, sometimes it assumes a bilingual reader that can understand all of it. There's some really good books in English and Spanish like that now, where the books just assume a bilingual reader. But like in the example I gave you, Drawn Together, you don't have to speak Vietnamese to understand that. But also some of our books that are in English but have a low word or phrase, those might be like a translanguage text as well. So I'm always looking for more really good example of translanguage text, particularly beyond English and Spanish. So if y'all come across one that you really like, let me know. I'll show you one resource. I have it here with me. Because I was looking for these. So this book, which is Ink Knows No Borders, is a collection of poetry about the refugee experience. And there's poetry that includes English with languages other than English and Spanish there. So I like that book, but please, y'all, give me a message if you find some examples beyond Spanish. Any other questions or something you want to share?
Bravo. Don't forget to join us this afternoon at 1 o'clock.
Yes, my comadre Ali Babino is presenting, right, Liz?
Yes. We're so excited to Dr. Babineau joining us this afternoon on policies and dual language, and so excited. So thank you.
Yeah, well, thank y'all so much. There's my information. I'd love to get a challenge to look for a certain book for a certain kid. So definitely reach out to me.
Bravo. I'm sure everyone's applauding in their respective.
Thanks, Dr. Pignon. Do I stay for a minute or do I X out?
No.
Okay, thank you so much. Have a great day. Bye, everyone. Bye, Valeria. Nos vemos.
And then you can close it when you're ready. Thank you, Dr. Stewart.